Hi. Well, we're out here sighting in our muzzleloaders. You know, the muzzleloading season is just around the corner. And of course, it's real important to check your rifle, but you know, we get a lot of questions, and I'm here with John Adams, who's probably been in muzzleloading 3 times as long as I have. And he gets a lot of questions too, and certainly knows this sport. So we're doing a little sighting in, and hopefully we can help you with some of your questions about black powder shooting, because we do know that a lot of you are just now getting into it. Well, John, let's go up and see how we did on that first target.
All right, Neil, let's take a look at him.
Well, not a bad looking target, John.
No, it looks pretty good to start out with. I pulled this last shot down here.
What load are you using there?
Well, this is my 54 that I hunt larger game with, and I run about 90 grains of 2F behind a round ball in that gun, and I've just changed the sights on it so I can hunt with it again this year. And it looks like I could probably bring her down just a little, but it's best to start out at 25 yards on these muzzleloaders and bring the sights roughly into point of aim.
Okay. Well, I know you probably spent a lot of time working up your load, but you were mentioning point of impact here at 25 yards. Now, I feel like I might be a little low if I want to be right on at, you know, out there at 50, 100 yards. And I know you've got a 1,500 yard target back there that we'll go ahead and shoot, but 90 grains seems a little bit low in 54 caliber. How did you arrive at working up that load?
This gun patterns best and shoots its best groups with around 120 grains. But off a bench, 120 grains is a little tough, and the point of impact rises only about an inch at 100 yards. And so I usually sight it in with the 90 and then fire a few shots later on before I go hunting with the full 120 grain load.
Okay.
Now, a lot of 54s just aren't up to 120 grains of 2F, so a person needs to be sure he checks with the manufacturer or reads his instructions that came with his gun to make certain he's not going to exceed the safe limits on it.
That's a good tip, because I do have a lot of people asking me, well, I don't know where to start. I don't know whether to use 2F or 3F or whatever. And usually those manuals will clue you in pretty good there on the recommended load chain to start with.
Right. Yeah.
This is my hunting load here. This is 90 grains, and it's not bad. It's going to be interesting to see what it does out there at 50 and 100. My most accurate load is 70 grains.
Well, in relation to your line of sight here, which would be lined up in the middle, this ball is still climbing up, and it's going to pass through the line of sight somewhere just beyond the 45 or 50 yard mark and tend to continue up and then arch down and probably be pretty close to right on at 100 yards.
It's a good point. Well, let's go back. I'm anxious to try the 50 yard target.
All right, let's do it. Well, Neil, it looks like I'm off to the left a little bit.
Yeah, I noticed I'm a little bit left too. What do you think?
It looks like I'm going to have to make an adjustment, probably move that group to the right a little bit before we move on out to 100 yards.
Now, that's pretty tricky, adjusting these metal sights. I'd like to see how you do that.
Well, basically, if you'll give me a hand there,
okay,
we'll tire down here and make a small adjustment in the rear sight, drifting it to the right in the same direction we want the group to move.
Okay.
We won't go much because we're only about 2 inches left out at there at 50 yards.
Well, I'm anxious to try this 100 yards and see how we do there. What do you think?
All right, well, let's take a shot at it.
Okay. Well, John, it looks like 100 yards, things begin to open up a little bit.
It tells a story, all right. We've got some pretty wild groups forming up down here. I expect we're going to have to take a little break and get us a little bite to eat. I think we're both a little bit shaky right now.
Well, I've seen you shoot some real tight groups at 100 yards, so that's got to be it. You need a little nourishment there. But, you know, one thing this does point out, that at 100 yards, that's probably the outer limits of a muzzleloader.
Right. Neil, I'd say that 100 to maybe 125 at the most, if you had a good rest, would be about the limit that you'd want to be trying to take a white-tailed deer or any larger game especially. It would be best to try to stalk closer than that. The wide dispersion we're seeing here is a result of the doubling the range from our 50-yard target where we were shooting some pretty tight groups.
Now, I could go probably to a 70 grain charge and shoot a little bit tighter group than that, but then my trajectory curve, you know, widens and it's a little harder to hold point on for all those distances in between.
Well, that's right. It's best to work up to one hunting load and maintain that load for hunting. It's all right to use the lighter loads for targets and really preferable because you don't become so recoil sensitive so early.
Right. You know, we haven't really touched on safety. Some people think muzzleloading is a little bit dangerous. You have anything to offer on that?
Well, I'd say that the prime concern is that a guy always wears safety glasses. You've only got two eyes to start with, and even with the miraculous surgery available today, they never can be made quite what they were to start with. And the exploding percussion caps on these rifles and the flash from those caps can destroy an eye just instantaneously. So the safety glasses, and you know, sometimes you hear people talking extremely loud, and it's a lot of times a result of working around loud machinery or around gunfire without the proper hearing protection. So,
then as far as you mentioned something the other day, it was kind of interesting, as far as a muzzleloader being loaded and with a cap off, being safe, there's probably some things there that you might add.
right, well, it's been documented several times that a loaded muzzleloader that's had the cap removed has always been thought to be safe, but there has been instances now where the residue from the cap has been known to ignite a charge when a hammer was dropped on a supposedly safe dry nipple. So I make a practice of sealing up the barrel and the powder charge by putting a small piece of leather and letting the hammer down on the nipple, or plugging the touch hole with a toothpick when you're hunting with a flintlock. You want to hunt with it loaded, but if you have to transport it or leave it sitting around in camp with a load down the barrel, it's best to put it in as safe a condition as you possibly can.
It's a good idea. Well, listen, why don't we have a bite to eat and try and give another try at this 100-yard target?
Let's see if we can fight this wind and get something down us, and we'll see if we can't tighten these groups up out here to 100 yards.
Well, John, have you ever had a hang fire or misfire?
I think sooner or later everybody experiences one with a muzzleloader, but...
Well, I know there must be a lot of them. I hear stories all the time. You know, muzzleloaders out there sitting all day in the woods, and finally that buck comes, and they cock the hammer and pull it, and it just goes, doesn't go off.
I think sooner or later everybody's going to experience that, and on a range we always snap a cap on a rifle before we load it the first time, but in a hunting situation you're often camped right there, and the deer are just possibly around the next tree from you, so you don't want to make any more noise than is absolutely necessary.
Good idea.
Before you have the opportunity for that shot. So I usually remove the nipple from the rifle and swab out the flash channel with a pipe cleaner and completely dry out the entire area to the rear of the chamber before I load the rifle the first time.
Well, that's a good idea.
Then once you have the load down the barrel, it's all clean. The fire from the percussion cap can get to the powder charge without any obstruction. And I usually leave the gun uncapped and shield the nipple with a small piece of leather to prevent any moisture from entering the back of the powder charge.
This sure makes a lot of sense. It's a good tip. Well, I'd like to see you shoot this 100-yard target again. Maybe we can get a good group.
Well, I think we're in better shape to do some shooting now.